Hi guys, this is Nadia from Ibali Crafts and today I want to show you how to make this wire woven upside down pear. If you like my tutorials, please consider subscribing because I upload new stuff every week. If you do use my tutorials, I would appreciate it if you could give me a mention to help me grow my channel. Right, let's get weaving. Okay, so we're going to grab our base wires. There is 4 of them. They're quite fine, 0.8 or U20 gauge, and we're going to mark the center. And we are going to take a piece of our half round and wrap it around roughly about a centimeter or so to the side. I'm not sure what that is in inches. And we're just going to do a couple of wraps around. You can, if you don't have half round, obviously use round, but honestly the half round just binds it so much better. So we're going to do that on both sides. I'm going to wrap it around maybe about 4 times now, and then I'm going to cut the half round in such a manner that both ends are hidden on the inside when you're bending it in. So flip it up and then trim both wires on the inside so that it doesn't show and get stuck on your clothing. Now we're going to do exactly the same on the other side, marking and on the other side of the marking, like here, and then we're going to bend it in. Now unfortunately I've bent it in the wrong way, so don't do that. Just put the wires, the cut wires, on the inside, not the outside. Doesn't really matter, it's just sort of a small detail. So we're going to place the stone on the inside of the cradle, upside down, so that the point of the pear snugly fits in the center. We're going to shape the 4 wires around the tip of the stone to kind of wedge it in place. It's a little bit fiddly at this stage, obviously, because there's nothing holding it in place. You need to hold your fingers over it, and we're going to bend just about a centimeter or so above the stone, and we're going to continue shaping. So if you put a tiny bend in it like I've done, it's much easier then to continue forming because the wires don't cross at the top. So that's what it looks like. You need to adjust it obviously as you go along, and then once we've done that, we need to secure the top. So once again, grab your half round wire. Again, if you don't have half round, obviously you can use round, but I just find that having half round really gives the whole design a lot more strength, and it kind of looks better as well. So if you can, get some half round. I do have it in my shop if you want any. For the people that are in the UK, if you are in the US, Rio Grande does half round, which is fantastic quality, so I like buying from there as well. All right, so once we've done that, we're going to wrap a couple of times around the top where the wires meet. Just very gently take your time with that. The neater you go, the better the end result. So that is just to tie all the wires together. I'm going to squish down, very technical term that. And then we're going to separate out the wires. So we're going to need 2 of the front wires, and this is going to become our bail. And then we're going to separate out the rest of the wires to sit at the side. For now, we're not going to use them. So all we're going to do is use that 45 centimeter piece of wire, or whatever that is in inches, I'm not sure. We're going to wrap this around, and just make sure when you get to the top, leave a sort of 10 centimeter tail, 5 to 10 centimeter tail, because we're going to need that to secure the bail once we come back. So just very slowly, the slower you go with this sort of technique, the neater it will look, so that the half round wire can slot alongside. So just continue. So that's what it looks like so far. So again, obviously you need to adjust the bail length to the size of your frame and stone. So just double check that. So if your stone is larger or smaller, that will affect the size of your frame. So you're going to have to sort of scale this down visually and then adjust to that. So to create a cradle at the back, we are just going to bend the tip in, and it sometimes can be a little bit tricky to isolate the single strands, so just take your time. It's quite easy at this stage to mark your wires because you're kind of slipping with the wires when you can't really grab, so be gentle with that. Especially copper is so soft and it marks super easy. Now the great thing with that is you can sand out any marks. If you have any sandpaper, you can go over the copper easily and remove marks that way quite easily because it's very soft, as I said. So we're going to bend some wires in near the sort of wrap that we've put to keep the wires together as well, and this will create like a shelf, little sort of recess for the stone to sit in. You'll need to adjust this as you go along. At the moment we just want to make sure the stone fits in, which it does, so happy with that. So now we're going to fold over the wires running at the top of the stone, and that's easy to do because obviously they're quite soft, as I said. You don't really need any tools. You could use a needle to separate out the wires if that's easier, and all we're going to do is pull them over the top of the stone to make sure it captures it. And that really is just, as I said, to set it in place. You may need to adjust a little bit later, and that's what it looks like. So now we're going to secure the stone a little bit further at the back, and we're just going to bend in the outermost wires at the back of the stone, and this will make sure the stone can't fall out. A little bit tricky, as I said, because I can't seem to isolate the wires, so that will have marked them, which is something that I later filed out. That's what it looks like so far. Stone is secure. So next we're going to bend the bail, and for that I just use my fingers. As I said, the sort of dead soft copper wire that I've had is so easy to manipulate. You can do that easily without any tools, and I find it easier to shape something with my hands rather than to use tools, which again also eliminates obviously marking your wires. So once you get to the back, we're going to separate out the wires, and we're going to fold the bail over on itself, and we are going to use the remainder of the tail. So I've left roughly about 5 to 8 centimeters there on the half round, and I'm going to be using this to wrap around all of the bail wires from top to bottom. So I'm utilizing some of the frame wires to anchor it, going through to make sure that it doesn't look too bulky. So I'm not running all the way across over the front. I'm running through the frame wires to attach. Just going to do this a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, and that should be enough to secure it. It's always a little bit fiddly, and that's why I recommend some needle nose pliers, if you can get them. They're quite a handy tool to have for these kind of occasions. So pull tight. You can see why the half round wire is good for that sort of thing. So there we go, that's what it looks like so far. So you've got your 2 wires, which we're going to come back to later. And now we've got 3 wires on the left and 3 wires on the right. So what we need to do now is kind of step up the wires on the right. So I'm just twisting them around the bezel, or the bail rather. And you have to be really careful if you're using square wire, because it's super easy to kind of start to put a twist into the wires, which then takes a lot of time to get untwisted if you want to reuse the square wires for any sort of other aesthetic work. So be gentle when you're folding them over and take your time. So I'm just going to straighten them out, and obviously you can see here I'm painstakingly trying to get, to keep the wires from twisting. So we're just folding them around the bail so that they meet up at the top, and that's what it looks like. So if necessary, untwist them. That's what it looks like. So Next, we're going to bring in our weaving wire. Again, I often work with the same weaving wire throughout the project, which means I just add in once if I can, and you know, later on if it's necessary, I will just bring in more wire. I just find it helps me to keep everything you know, without snagging. So what we're doing here is a 2x5, which means we're wrapping 5 times around the base wire. There's a little inset on the left that shows you what it looks like. So 5 times around the base wire and then twice around both wires, and then we just repeat. So that's a super easy weave. Just make sure you scoot your weaves up when you're doing this, especially with a square wire. It can happen that the weave isn't quite as even because of obviously the corners. So scoot it up. Another really handy tool, bent nose pliers. And once we've done that, it's time to shape our first weave. So there's a good amount of weaves that we have there. Once again, you need to adjust this for your own design. It will be different depending on the size of your stones. You kind of have to visually adjust this for you. So we're going to twist it in an anti-clockwise motion, and we're going to fold it around the stone like so. You're just going to have to adjust the shape as you go, and then we're going to create swirls at the bottom. This little detail that we have to create a little bit more interest in the piece. So first we're going to attach that weave to the frame with some of the leftover 0.420 gauge wire that we have. So we're going to go underneath the frame, and we're going to attach to the bottom. So that can be done in any which way as long as it's secure and it doesn't bulk out your piece too much. Remember, when cutting your wires, make sure you cut them in such a way that they can't get stuck on clothing when you're trimming off wires. So just secure. This can be quite a fiddly business, and quite often you need to use something to help you get underneath the wires, and for that I usually use a T-pin, which is really a really handy little tool for these sort of instances, or just another piece of wire to wedge underneath. So next we're going to create the swirls. So in these instances, because the wires are flat, it's quite difficult to get your round nose pliers in, so I generally tend to shape these weaves by hand first, roughly at least, and then I'm going to trim off the wires, because it's much easier to control the shape and look without using a pair of pliers, which in this case I find marks the wires a lot more because you can't really get a good grip on the wires. So just scoot it down and shape it, and we're going to trim off the wire just in the center. Next we're going to shape it. So once you've got your wire cut down to the right size, you can always adjust it later. So I always tend to cut a little bit too long and rather trim it down, because you can always cut off, but it's difficult to add in, obviously. So that's my piece of 5 cents to that. All right, so next going to shape the bottom wire as well. Once again, it's done by hand, so trim it down to size first, and in this instance we can use a pair of pliers because there's a little bit of an overlap, so it's easier to get to the wire there. And I'm just going to rotate. So now a little trick is to pinch the wire ends. That will narrow it down to a point and will give you a little bit of a sort of refined tip when you're twisting the curls as well, kind of like a tapered look, which you would normally get if you are using a file once the curls have been achieved. So this is easily done by just pinching the wire ends. I'm just going to shape and place it until you're satisfied. As I said, I quite often readjust. I'm a really slow wrapper. I adjust and readjust throughout all my projects. So take your time with that. The more you pay attention to small details, the better the end result. So that's what it looks like so far. Next, we're going to create a coil with the remaining wire on the right hand top. And all it is the remainder of the 0.4. If you need to add in, just add in about a meter or so of wire that we're going to create. I'm never good at measuring length of my weaving wire because I have a tendency to work off the reel. So once you've got your length, we're going to follow the initial shape of the weave, and we are going to come through the frame underneath the first weave, and we're going to be attaching that wire to the frame itself. There we go. And then once again, obviously shape it if you need to and readjust it. So now I have attached it to the frame, but I later on changed it to attach it to the wires that seat the stone, just simply because the way I'm attaching it now, it kind of bulked the frame out a little bit, so that didn't fit quite nicely. So later on I changed it. So when you're attaching this wire, make sure that you are attaching it to the stone running at the back of the stone rather than the frame running around the stone, if that makes any sense. Right, so next we are going to bring in some more weaving wire, and we are going to create some more 2x5s. So once again, super easy. 5 times around the base, and then twice around both wires. So I'm going to repeat this until you have got enough of a length. Once again, the length just depends on your size wire. I've just given you kind of the number that I have used for mine. As I said, you're going to need to adjust it for yours because it will obviously be different. Right, so we're going to once again bring in my trusty bent nose pliers. Really love that tool, super handy to have for these kind of things. So once you've got that, we are now going to create the swirls on the left hand side. We're going to follow the initial weave, but we are rotating this in a clockwise motion, and we're going to create swirls on the right. So exactly the same process that we've used on the bottom. So just kind of shape until you're satisfied. And obviously there's lots of readjusting going on until you're happy. So don't cut off the wire until you've got a good initial shape. Trim off. And just make sure that the wires sit flush, and I use my tools to kind of press the weaves down, or the wires rather, so that they don't stick out, because these kind of swirls are prone to get stuck in clothing. So you need to tie these down really well, which we'll get to in a moment. So going to shape the bottom one as well, same process. Once you're happy, we are going to continue with the next design, and this is the last of the square wires that we are going to work into the design. So we're just going to go through the center of the piece, and very gently, once again, you can twist it actually if you want to. I've kept them kind of straight, but it would look quite pretty if you gave them a twist before you feed them through, obviously because they're square. They give you really beautiful patterns when you twist them, so you could do that as well. So I'm just bringing it through the middle of the frame, and then once again I'm going to attach it somewhere. In this instance I've gone around the bale wires, and I've cut off a fair bit, because all you need there is a quick anchor. You don't need to attach it 2 or 3 times, or wrap it 2 or 3 times around the column. So I've just cut it short, and all I've done is I tucked it in behind the bale wires. When I first started my wire weaving journey, I was convinced I had to wrap everything 3 or 4 times, and all I achieved doing was make everything look bulky, until I realized you don't really need to do that. You know, quite often for certain aspects you can anchor it just once or twice, and that generally is sufficient, unless obviously you have something that's load bearing, you know, like the bezel or the bale or something that will take a lot of load and friction. Then you probably need to do a couple more wraps, but for something like that, a simple wrap is enough to keep it in place. There we go, that's what it looks like. So next we are going to tie down those swirls. Now this is quite important, I think, for me anyway, is going to use some 0.6 half round, which is very, very fine. And the reason why I like using half round is just that you get sort of the width surface area of a 0.6, but not the height, which makes everything look a lot less bulky when you, especially when you're tying it down. And it looks really pretty as well. So it looks like an aspect of the design itself when you're using half round, rather when you're using your round wires, it looks a little bit bulky. So we secure all the swirls in place like that. So I've put them on every swirl, and I've attached them on every frame I could. That's what it looks like. So they're attached everywhere at the bottom and the top, to make sure that they are immobile and can't come undone when you're wearing the piece. So next we're going to do the back 2 wires that we've had left over, and I'm doing once again trusty 2x5, so 5 times around the base frame, or rather the bottom wire, and then obviously twice. It's always a little bit fiddly near the frame when you're wrapping, so take care when you're doing the wraps, and be slow and use your tools to scoot down the weaves. So I'm just going to continue. And what we're doing now is we are folding this weave up towards the belt. So first we're going in a downward motion, so this is all clockwise, and then we are following the weave back up. So now what we need to do is you need to decide what we do here. So you can either create a little swirl like I've done, or you can attach both of the wires to the bale. It's entirely up to you, depending on what you prefer in the look department. So I've decided I'm going for a swirl and see how that goes, but obviously you can change that if you want. So next we need to attach the remaining wire to the bale. So I'm just going to feed it through the center. Now you just need to find the best place where you can add in the wire. Obviously it's still an area where it's quite visible, so place it in such a way that it can't really be seen. There we go, and obviously tighten it up. So in this instance I would probably wrap it around twice to make sure that it's secured, because this is obviously an area where it can be pulled or otherwise manipulated because you're wearing it. So once again, create a swirl, trim off your wires, and then shape. There's a lot of manipulating going on until a piece is finished, so I spend quite a lot of my time just adjusting until I'm completely happy. So if you don't get to see all of that because I cut it out, you'd be bored to death. So next, one of my absolute favorite settings. I've got lots of favorite settings, but this one is fantastic. It's for diamond cut gemstones. Looks really pretty. So what we need to do here is grab our square wire. Once again, square wire just beats round wire because it's got a flat surface area. It grabs onto the stone better, and it's structurally a lot stronger than your round for these sort of things. So we're going to create like a prong in the middle of the wire, or leave roughly 5 centimeters or so to one side, and then start. So we're going to create 3 of those prongs. So we're folding the wire in half, squishing it down, very technical once again, and then roll the wire back up before creating another prong. Now when you are bending the wire back down, placing your pliers on top where the prong is, just make sure you leave enough space to account for the wire thickness when you creating the bend, because if you are aligning the top exactly with the prong, the previous prong, it will be too long, because obviously the wire needs to travel, and there is a thickness to that. So keep that in mind when you are wrapping. So just grab near the tip about 2 or 3 centimeters below, and then put the bend, and you can see the bend adds some additional length. Once you've done that, you squish it together, and I tend to squeeze as hard as I can, but you have to be gentle, because sometimes your pliers slip and then it can twist the wires, and then you may as well start again, because it looks really untidy. So that's what it looks like. One of the prongs slightly too long. So for demonstration purposes, I've used a big stone, so it's easier for me to show you. So what we need to do next is we need to bend the tip of the prong just long enough so that they comfortably fit over the crown, but don't encroach on the table of the stone. The table is the flat section at the top of the stone, and the crown is sort of the beveled edge that runs on the outside. So all you want to do is cover the stone, the sort of crown, but not the table. So that's what it looks like so far. I'm going to fold them into each other, and next I am going to take one of the legs and wrap it around the outside, the bottom legs. So I'm just twisting very carefully, and just take your time with that, and 1 or 2 wraps is enough. Obviously you don't want to bulk it out too much. If you're going to place it in your design, you want to have this area as inconspicuous as possible, so that it fits through your wire gaps. So next we need to open up the prongs again. So just make sure that they line up before you do that. If you make sure that they line up, it means they are already quite straight when you put your stone in the center. So we're just going to unfold them like so, and then I'm going to open up the wires a little bit, so readjust the position if need be. You can squeeze them more if you want to as well, to make sure that the gap is closed. And I'm just poking a little bit of a hole into the base wires to give the stone something to sit on. So place it in there and then squeeze it shut. So this takes a little bit of practice, but once you have it done, once you get to do it, it's such a beautiful setting. Now obviously for larger stones I would recommend doing this with 4 prongs. This is just to demonstrate to you how to do the 3 prong, but you can do the exact same process with 4 prongs if you want more security for your stone. That's what it looks like so far. And to make it extra secure, I tend to take a piece of 0.4 or 0.3 depending on your size of the stone and the wire, and I'm just wrapping around the prongs once or twice, giving the stone some extra weave running alongside. You can see in a little inset what I mean. So I'm just folding this as shown, and obviously adjust if necessary. You can see how the prongs just cover the girdle, or the crown rather, and adjust. And that's what it looks like. So once you've created your stone setting, attach it to the frame here and then trim off the legs. The last thing you need to do is, or if you want to, is add some accent beads at the top. I've used some 0.6 20 gauge wire for that, just because it's a lot stronger than your 0.4. And then all you need to do is tie it off to the frame, and that's the whole design done. So that's it. You can loss it if you want thereafter, or keep it bare, entirely up to you. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. As always, if you enjoyed this, subscribe to my channel, because I upload new stuff all the time. And I would absolutely love it if you could share your designs with me in my wire wrap group, which is called Wire Wrap and Jewelry Artists Worldwide. We are a fun bunch and always have some challenges going, so come and visit us on there. And lastly, if you need any square half round wire in the UK, I've got loads of those on my website, and I quite often run workshops and have tutorials that I sell as well, which are a bit more complex than the ones you get on my YouTube channel, so there's a bit of variety there. Yeah, so just gander over to my Etsy shop or to my website and have a look. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.